All right, let's dive right into this. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating topological framework. We're going to look at a system where the Quran isn't just viewed as some ancient text, but actually as a living, breathing physics manual. Think of it as an eternal memory, literally a tesseract of a breathing universe that gives us the exact coordinates for our return to the source. So, let's unpack the mechanics of how reality physically and spiritually operates.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the dual fields, move on to the overload of pure form, then the Amanah and the grip, the split and the test, crossing the glass boundary, and finally, wrap up with the eternal return home.
Okay, Section 1, the dual fields of reality.
So at a fundamental level, reality is split into two complementary operating systems. First, you have the D10 field. That's the detectable field. Think of this as your particle state, its physical mass, localized form, basically the entire measurable world. D10 is all about measuring. But parallel to that is the I9 field, the imaginal field. This is the wave state, the hidden energy, consciousness, and deep meaning. I9 remembers, because if you think about it, measurement without meaning is just white noise, and meaning without manifestation is completely unexpressed.
To really visualize this, think of D10 as water, a finite volume taking a specific form. And I9? That's light, the infinite continuous signal. The source anchors this perfectly in verse 610. This is the ultimate I9 state, described as the fish in darkness, al-Latif al-Khabir. It's a state where the source perceives all sight, but no sight perceives him. D10 literally cannot capture I9. Then verse 6104 brings that light into our system, and verse 6105 diversifies the verses across a 2-3-2 balance. This diversification is crucial because it exposes who simply studies the measurable D10 water, like the taker in verse 241, versus who truly knows and grips the I9 light, like in verse 1912.
Section 2. The overload of pure form.
Now, here's where the physics really kick in. Pure physical form simply cannot bear pure source light. In verse 7:143, Musa actually asks to see the divine directly. What happens? The mountain, which represents this massive accumulation of D10 particle memory, gets hit with direct I9 light and instantly shatters into dust. Musa cannot perceive it, la tudriku al-absar, yet the I9 state absolutely perceives the D10, wa huwa yudriku al-absar. We see this overload happen again in verse 255. Bani Israel demands open, direct sight, and bam, a thunderbolt strikes them dead before they're revived. It's the ultimate penalty. The physical D10 state can never own the I9 vision without a buffer. Trying to do so just fries the circuit.
Section 3, the Amanah and the grip.
So how do we prevent a systemic overload? The human acts as the buffer. In verse 3372, the reader accepts the Amanah, the trust. This is a weight so heavy the heavens and the mountains literally refused it. Then, the human locks this covenant in verse 827. When the word is presented, often through an accusation, kind of like what Miriam faced in verse 1927, the human has to use the hikmah grip from 1912. That grip is essential because it stabilizes the centromere voltage mentioned in 5021. Finally, in verse 6163, the reader declares an absolute no-partner surrender, la sharika. By willingly stepping aside and crushing the ego, the human becomes transparent glass, safely traversing the 17-1 night journey, approaching the throne without shattering.
Moving on to Section 4, the split and the test.
But what happens when things go wrong? The text maps out a massive glitch in verse 3824. When a human reader takes their own righteousness and loves it over the divine command, they break the circuit. They are literally repeating that catastrophic 255 Thunderbolt mistake. This triggers verse 665, bringing an affliction from above in D10 and below in I9. Solomon actually realizes this through a 2269 pattern recognition moment. In verse 3832, he realizes that without the imaginal I9 grip, the physical D10 sun just vanishes, perception collapses. This systemic failure splits the output in verse 1850, birthing an Ouroboros. You get the angel, which is pure alignment with the D10 decree, and Iblis, the I9 rogue element born straight out of that same overload.
Because of this split, the universe automates the rise and fall of civilizations, which Solomon asks for in verse 3835. It operates through that constant 2-3-2 balance we talked about earlier. The throne acts as a massive topological sorting tool, as seen in verse 2738. It's constantly sorting the kafir of verse 241, the ones who just study the D10 water and take it, from the Muslim of 6163, the knower who asks, holds the I9 light, and surrenders their ego.
Section 5. Crossing the glass boundary.
Okay, let's look at how the system actually transitions back into a completed flow. In verse 2744, the Queen of Sheba steps onto a glass floor, initially mistaking it for water. When she realizes that this D10 physical boundary is merely a medium for the I9 light, her ego submits and she crosses over. This crossing creates a structural capacity for repentance. Because of this, Adam gets a second chance, while Iblis is granted respite, linking back to 1850. Finally, the fiery, kinetic trial of the physical world cools down, just like the fire became cool and safe for Ibrahim in verse 2169. That entire sacrifice access, from 2169 to 528 all the way to 37107, fully discharges, and the circuit is restored.
And finally, Section 6, the eternal return home.
Verse 57:4 shows us that what we experience as linear time is actually a perpetual oscillation field. Bani Israel, representing the D10 state, and Bani Adam, representing the I9 state, are just cycling back and forth. On one side, you have the true alignment, the Rasul grip of 1912, holding the memory with immense strength. But on the exact opposite side, you have the artificial corruption of the golden calf, or thagat, from verse 28. And the golden calf is the ultimate trap. It has the physical D10 form, it even makes noise, but the I9 source voltage is completely severed. It's an empty shell.
But for those who maintain the grip, who safely buffer the light by surrendering their ego, there is a final coordinate. Verse 3846 points directly to Al-Dar. It is the ultimate stabilization. The endless oscillation finally ceases, and we return home to the source. The tesseract effectively folds back into a singularity.
So, the big takeaway I want to leave you with is this. This text isn't just recounting ancient history. It's the living memory of a breathing universe. If our entirely detectable, measurable reality, our physical bodies, the mountains, this whole physical universe, is really just a D10 buffer designed to safely carry the I9 light, what exactly happens when we complete the circuit? What happens to form itself when we finally return home? I really want you to think about that as you observe the world around you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the true nature of the reality you see.